Outlaw Country by Ghotty. Chapter 17, The Grand Tour. Of the 3 city walls I've seen, this one was by far the largest. Wolfsbane's walls were roughly 20 feet tall and extended as far as I could see. The stone was unnaturally smooth, as if built by machines. From my understanding, the people of Wolfsbane didn't have much of a concept of an assembly line, so I could only assume that it's magic. We'd been riding for 3 days or so. The carriage had been only halfway on its journey when I arrived, which makes the distance between Wolfsbane and the Lang Creek a week's journey by horse. Was it just a coincidence that New California and the town of the Chari were so close? I had no way of knowing. I was sitting atop Jeff, who had somehow been silent for the entire ride, determined to play dumb. I had no opportunity to ask him about it, but I presume he knows something that I don't. He usually does. The carriage and remaining guards approached the massive wooden gates, which immediately opened. I suppose they recognized the carriage. I thought the security was a tad lax. Emily spoke up as if reading my mind. The gate is keyed into the carriage's magical signature. It's impossible to fake, even to the most knowledgeable of sages. I grunted in acknowledgement. I wasn't much for infiltration anyway. She hadn't grown to like me much in the last 3 days. Maybe it was almost blowing her torso off, or maybe it was my lack of decorum. From what I'd gathered, the latter insulted her far more than the former. For now, we've all learned a few things about what's impossible, chimed the old man, whose name was Lu Lang. The enormity of the heavens and earth are not for us mortals to fathom. I had only learned his name just yesterday, overhearing it in conversation, and I never bothered to ask. Emily's response was cut short as we passed through the gate. Young men in shiny armor were saluting as we passed, a single hand over the heart while the other hand held a spear. Since we 3 were the strongest, we had the honor of leading the carriage. That's why I had a clear view of the city's interior. I'd heard of bigger cities when I was back on Earth. I can only imagine they looked something like this. There were buildings as far as I could see, mostly only a single story, though many more. They were made of mostly wood and stone, and they were far from uniform. I could see the tavern near the entrance, looking almost identical to what I was used to. Next to it was a 6-story stone tower, its purpose unknown to me, and across the street was a quaint little store, and it neighbored a tailor twice its size. Clearly, the construction wasn't properly planned, which made it strange how well it all came together. I could liken it to a room you've stayed in for a long time. Sure, it's a mess and everything is scattered across the floor, but you know damn well where everything is. And it's an odd feeling, considering I had never been here before. How quaint, remarked Lau. He looks disdainful. Emily ignored him. I'll lead the way, follow me, and don't stray too far. I scoffed. Afraid I'll get lost? Yes, she said. Yeah, that's fair enough. I never thought I'd bathe in a tub the size of a house, but here I was. I was in a castle large enough to fit a small town's population into. I didn't have time to appreciate much of it, as I was ushered into the bath the moment I arrived. I suppose a month's worth of natural musk wasn't appropriate for such an opulent setting. It took a bit of exploring, as I shooed away the attendants before they could give me a proper tour of the facility. I was reasonably sure that this was the bathtub I was supposed to use, despite its enormous size. I wasn't sure if they had a house-size bath for everybody, or the princess was trying to butter me up. Besides, I'm considered a man of stature now, as apparently strength is the only viable manner. That's true anywhere, but it's taken to quite the extreme as of late. The water was perfect, filled with soap, and it seemed magical in its feeling against my skin. It probably was. Even so, I felt like I shouldn't be here, as if such wealth wasn't for a man of my stature. Then again, I know full well that invoking said feelings was the entire point of the display of wealth, so fuck it. Maybe I'd piss in the water. Please don't piss in the water. I swiveled around, drawing my walker. The voice came from directly behind me. It should have been impossible for anyone to sneak up on me in this massive, echoey chamber. I would have heard the splish or felt the water move. Nonetheless, there was a man standing there. Well, more of a boy, really. He was blond and looked like he was in his early 20s. I didn't bother taking in any more details as I was half a second away from turning the water red. "Whoa, relax," he yelled, raising his hands in surrender. "I come in peace." He trailed off, looking down the barrel of my gun. He fell silent and put his hands together, closed his eyes, and looked as if he was deep in contemplation. I kept my gun steady. He opened up his eyes after a few moments and looked into mine. "Why do you have a gun?" "Why wouldn't I?" I growled. He looked generally confused. "Because it's a hot spring." "And?" He fell silent for another moment. "Okay, that's not really the question I wanted to ask. What I really want to know is this. Where did you keep it?" I stayed silent, still trying to parse the situation out. Did you shove it up your ass?" "Huh?" His face took on a serious expression. "I asked if you shoved your oversized revolver up your anal cavity. That thing has got to be at least 14 inches. If that's the case, I'm afraid no man could ever satisfy you. May I suggest—" I let the gun drop. If he was here to kill me, I'd rather he get it over with so I don't have to suffer through this joke of a conversation. I stood up, revealing my belt still wrapped around my waist. I never really go without it. Normally I would have used my peacemaker, as my old walker could have been submergible. It fires magic now, though, so I reckon it would work just fine in this condition. He put a hand over his heart and breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank God. I'd hate for your ass juice to dirty up such a nice spring. Though I suspect it's too late for that, as you don't seem to know the difference between a hot spring and a bathtub." "I know the difference. Just didn't realize this was a hot spring." "You thought it was a bathtub that could fit dozens of people. Is that not something rich folks would do?" He looked thoughtful for a moment and then nodded. "Fair enough." This was an incredibly stupid conversation, and I hate to engage him, but something was bugging me. "How did you know I was considering pissing in the water?" He shrugged. "You just had a planning to piss in the water kind of face about you." Was it really so easily to tell that's what I was thinking? Second time today, and here I thought I was stone-faced. Or maybe there was something else here at play. We fell silent, and I used the moment to look him over. He looked dainty, fair-skinned, and a delicate disposition, suggesting a life spent with thick walls and wallets between him and every problem. He had the same overly beautiful features as just about everybody I'd met here, but his face was softer, less exaggerated maybe. His long blonde hair trailed all the way down his mid-back, completely straight and even. "Like what you see?" he asked. "I like the way you snuck up on me." "How'd you do it?" He shrugged innocently. "What do you mean?" I gestured towards our surroundings. Walker back in its holster. "We're in the middle of a massive goddamn hot spring. Apparently, you would have had to wade through dozens of feet of waist-high water just to get to me." "Oh, that. Sorry, I didn't mean to surprise you. It's just how I get around." "Well, I'm not looking for an apology. I want to know how," I insisted. "That would be an incredibly useful trick." Well, he laughed. "Oh, how pragmatic of you. Sorry, but that's a bit too much to ask of someone that you just met. Why don't we get to know each other a little better first?" he said, winking. "Right. Well, this was a lost cause. I decided that I'd rather have this conversation when we weren't both naked in a steamy spring, so it was time for a tactical retreat." I said nothing more as I turned back and began to wade towards the exit. I made it to my fancy wooden door before the blond man called out to me, "Hold on a moment." I turned around, arms crossed. "What do you want?" He outstretched one arm and kept the other close to his chest. He smiled, and formed a finger gun in both hands, and then he made a clicking noise with his mouth and mimed a shot with finger guns. Nice cock. I slammed the door shut behind me.